Hello, hello, hello!
Hello, John.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good. Look! It's Tilda. I am so happy.
Well, we have the most beautiful project here, and I
lovely.
found this online.
I know.
And I had it in my little bank of things to talk to Tash about, and the next thing I know, you're video calling us, and he's like,
No, it was ridiculous because I do a video call and we're like, look! And Jim was like, I've seen, I want to do that, I want to do that. So there we are.
And I pulled my laptop up and I said, look, it's here, I've even got the page bookmarked.
It was so surreptitious that. But honestly, what an amazing project. But what I love about what you've done is not only are we doing this, and I'm going to get you to fan these because 46 of the most beautiful colours. You can fan that. You're good at fanning. I'm not very good at fanning. And you got the gorgeous peacock background as well. I knew we'd have
Shall
fun.
we pause for a moment and just talk about what this is? Because for those of you who perhaps don't know, but we ought to mention it. I mean, where have you been? Where have you been?
Just assumed everybody knew.
Just to you see, you're just powering on.
Exactly.
Such is the will to get this quilt done.
Oh, I cannot tell you how excited I am about this.
It's a stunner,
because
isn't
we
it?
changed it as well.
Yes. Yes. But this particular quilt, should we go into overhead and have a little pick?
Yes.
Little
Can
pick
I?
of the
Let me try and do the fanning
pattern.
thing.
Oh, you're going to try?
I'm going to try
Well, I'll
the
go into overhead so we
waftage.
can see the pattern. Let's just get everything ready. There we go. This is what we're talking about here. This. Oh, look at John's box in the way, eh?
Always. Me coming in and messing up the shots.
I know. But this is the embroidery flower quilt. And what's beautiful about this is it looks deceptively detailed and fancy. And yet it's all squares, isn't it, John?
It's all squares.
It's
and it's
all
9
squares.
pieces. It's effectively 9 different blocks.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, you think, oh my goodness, not a chance ever. And then when
No.
you see that delicious collection of fabric that goes with it,
I know, it ticks all
it's
the
just
boxes.
glorious. It's absolutely glorious.
And again, the beautiful thing about this is, as a cross-stitcher, this just appeals to me because it just looks like a
does.
gigantic cross-stitch. And it's a big boy, isn't it?
Well, yeah, 63 by 81.
It's a lovely big quilt.
It's really good.
Beautiful.
But the great thing as well is one of my friends, he had bought the kit,
Yes.
picked it up on the Wednesday.
Yep.
Tuesday sends me a picture of it, and he's added on enormous borders on the
Yes.
side. So it's 83 inches square, I think he made it.
He's a clever chap. And we will be able to see his quilt at some point, won't
I know.
we? It's just really exciting.
It's
But
in
you
my
can
studio
see,
to be quilted right now.
it's like making 9 little quilts.
It is.
And then piecing it together. But John, you're going to take us through this whole process, aren't you?
Definitely.
We're going to do a series of these shows. For those of you who've bought this quilt bundle, well done, because we had an initial inventory. And Tilda solids, for those of you who've not experienced them before, are beautiful quality. The colour palette is just... Well, it's just got this elegance to it, hasn't
really
it? That you
and the
don't get from a normal plain.
But it ties in so beautifully with the normal pattern fabrics that they do as well.
Absolutely. But getting hold of these fabrics
Oh, it's been a nightmare.
is really hard. So
This,
the supplier,
there's
UK
already a wait for like 3 months just for the peacock.
agreed. So the supply of this product, it's really challenging. So we bought in what we needed to do our kits. We did an initial run of kits. They disappeared, and then
Within
we
a
had
day?
yes, and then we had demand for more kits, so we produced some more. And these are really labour intensive to produce as well.
they're
You'll
incredibly
see how
hard.
we've done them. They are beautiful, but we created as many kits as we could in the end, and we just bought all the stock out of the supplier. So anything we show you from the Tilda Solids front today, if you love it and you want it, you need to get it because
And get it now.
yes, we won't be getting more stock.
No.
Sadly, it's just getting it in is the challenge for us. It's not us being mean, John.
No, not at all.
Not as being.
And if you don't know, if you want to see a bigger portion of it, we have very surreptitiously just put these on here just in case. And I love them. The pops of colour everywhere. Oh, who doesn't
Divine.
love them?
But again, we've got some patterns at the top as well, and you can see that the colour palette just mixes in with all the Tilda. So if you have a Tilda stash that you love,
and if you don't, please check out the website because
Have a
everybody
word.
needs to have the Tilda stash.
they do. There's a timeless elegance to Tilda
They
that
really
just
are.
yeah.
And it was a lady came into my shop the other day and she'd never seen Tilda fabric. She picked up she said, oh, these are really nice. I said, if you start down that road, I'm warning you.
You won't
But,
stop.
oh my God, she absolutely loved it. But the colours, so you're getting 46 different colours. You need the 46 if you're going to stick to the colourway
Yeah.
of it. And you can tell I'm not very good at this fanning thing. I
We
did try.
don't have
but
more kits. I'd love to say,
There aren't
when we
any.
get an influx of demand, I would love to say that we are going you know, to be able to provide more. Unfortunately, no.
You just can't.
For those of you who got it, great.
Now, one thing
This is
just
what
to
you'll have
show you,
received.
on each one of your kits, I know this will get confusing, but what you're looking for on each one, we can go to the close-up over here. You'll see every one of your fabrics has the fabric number. It says fabric 11, and then it's got the code of what it is and the name. The one you're looking for is that fabric number there, fabric 11.
Yes.
So even though it's fabric 11, it's 120009.
Yes.
We are referring to it as fabric 11. You'll see that fabric 10 is labelled the same way.
Yes.
Every single piece of fabric is labelled accordingly. And it's really important to note that, because when we come to this sheet over here, all of the fabrics, the one that is important is the name, the number of the fabric. We've called fabric 1, 2, 3, 4. Because when you come to put this together, bear with, of course, you will then have a little grid over here which will tell you fabric 24 goes there, fabric 25, 23, 24. It's really important that when you have these, that you keep this label on the outside of your bag. So what I found the easiest way that worked for me is having a bag like this, cutting out the pieces of squares that I needed, and then making sure that the fabric label was available for you to see on the outside of the bag at all times. It just made it easier for you to be able to store your pieces of fabric as well as have the label on, that you know what you were doing.
And this is a top tip whenever you're quilting, isn't it, John? If you've got something that uses lots of fabrics, to put all of those into bags, you're not going to then go, oh no, heck, which is which.
And the thing as well, what I find as well, I've got a set of bags, because I know at the minute I've just said you need 46 plastic bags, you've just got to say, the environment, the dolphins! I am with you. I love the dolphins more than you do.
You reuse them.
But you do, and I've used these for projects over and over and over again. I think when I started quilting 8 years ago, I bought a massive bag of these off Amazon, and I've literally got the same ones. I've never cracked into the second half of the bag. So, not that supporting a big mega company like that is appropriate, but we all do.
But you know.
But you can tell with the little fanning over here, and I know I'm not
beautiful.
But you just go through the little
fanning.
Let's fannings.
Show his fanning. Excellent. Oh, I would say excellent fanning. Look, it won't switch. Switch where you're supposed to. There we are.
Just look at that.
Absolutely beautiful.
I think you might need to press another
button. Honestly,
it's John, your gorgeous nails.
I think so. I'm using the pads of my fingers, but I think it's a bit warm today, you know.
It's a little warm.
Fingers are a little warm. These as well, to have your labels, even if you just keep a bit of self-edge or whatever, to have this for future reference when you're looking at your Tilda fabrics to match up is going to be really handy, because as much as this is, say, fabric 22, or 23, John. Sorry, you go. Actually,
you wanted fanning.
Look, there we are.
Just
so
beautiful.
As much as this, say, is fabric 23, in the pattern, the code that we've put on it, this 120038, that is the code that you will find that particular fabric, moss, listed as cut to order.
If you did want to cut it to
order.
order.
So if you did want to buy some more, say, you know, for a future project, or to add a beautiful sashing around your quilt, this is what you'd need.
And the backing as well.
Yes.
Because when I was cutting these and using them, can I just say, I was looking at this red over here, and I just thought, oh my gosh, that's the most... Because red is a hard colour to actually find one that you really love. But then equally, the country red over here, number 6, they're just absolutely beautiful, because you've got a really soft tone to them, which is just so gorgeous for the Tilda's ethos of it.
But for the purposes of the pattern, the number here
is what we're looking for.
That is the number in that pattern. In the wider world, these fabrics are known by the code that's on the label, and you have both of those bits of information on there.
And if that doesn't work, you've also got the name of what the fabric is called as well.
Right.
I'm a bit worrying my fanning has now failed.
While you're fanning,
I think I've failed
fanning. So why are we mentioning the fact that the fabrics are cut to order if you already have your quilt kit? Well, quite simply because who doesn't like to buy some beautiful fabrics to go with their Tilda? But also, we have had a customer who wanted to add an extra border in, for example, and bless her, she came to us and said, which fabric should I go for? And the answer is, they're all in the quilt. So you could choose whichever is your favourite, buy some extra fabric to sash with, and have a lovely extra detail there, couldn't you?
But what one of my client did as well, Stefan, he made pillows as well. So he created his own, because the great thing about it is if you see an element in the pattern that you really like he really liked these little the little flowers over here.
Beautiful.
He then made a whole little group of those using different colours to be able to make them pop. So, and you've got so much fabric left in this kit that you would actually be able to make a lot more. You can play with it because you've cut the squares up already. So this is the collection of the 46 fabrics.
Let's show the
when I've finished wafting them around. I don't think I'm as good at this. I don't know how I didn't manage to get that quite as...
Oh, it's all right, John.
Can tell the boys are doing it never quite as good as when the girls do it.
It's all right.
But the colourways are just beautiful. And I think as well, when you do treat yourself for a product like this, you do actually then, you do feel really spoiled when you look at that colourway there. It is just so brilliant. And then the background fabric that you're going to be using is this gorgeous peacock over here. And you can just tell that it's, I don't know what you'd call it. It's almost like, it looks like lagoon water to me.
Yeah, it's a petrol type colour, isn't it? It's gorgeous. It's really lovely. And actually as well, that's another thing to mention is you could bind your quilt in whichever colour you like. But we will have some peacock available for binding because the original quilt just had a peacock binding.
It did, yes.
Very simplistic, which is fine. You might want to do some scrappy binding and use lots of your bits and pieces and end up with a fabulous rainbow.
That would look amazing.
Yeah, it would, you know. The options are all there, aren't they? But the beauty of these fabrics is not just in the colour. Is it, John? The quality.
Oh my gosh,
as someone who stocks fabric.
Tilda, I've only recently come to Tilda, and I tell you, every single one of these solids I have loved working with. They feel amazing, and the shrinkage is a lot less than you'd expect. It's just such a gorgeous, gorgeous collection, and it just, you can feel that you're working with quality, and it is a little more expensive than the normal solids, but you can, when you feel it and work with it, you can tell why.
Do you know, though, it's a premium product, so
it is.
Yeah, of course. Of course,
Well,
it's a premium
you don't stock anything else, do you?
No, we genuinely don't. You know.
And the great thing about this is, not only are you getting these amazing fabrics, but you're also... Now, this is where we deviate, so everybody at Tilda World, please forgive me. This was me, not anybody else. I am a huge fan of pixelated quilts. Tracy Perks from Rope and Anchor does a series of them, and you'll see them as we go through this series. But the good thing with these is she uses squares and half-square triangles. This quilt uses squares. So you're able to use a product called Quilter's Grid. Now, many of you have heard of Quilter's Grid, some of you haven't. So once I get my last 5 fabrics messed in a row here and get them back on the little pile, you just want to sit there and look at it for the rest of the week.
This is where it gets exciting, though, isn't it?
But this is amazing product. This really is lovely. So this is it's a bit like a normal dress interfacing. I don't make clothing usually, but the great thing with it is once you've actually applied it to the fabric isn't bulky, it's not sticky. It just literally fades onto the fabric and it feels beautiful. One side is sticky, so it's just the usual adhesive interfacing on the one side.
Little tiny weeny glue dots, aren't they, John? Let's just see if we're going to close up whether we can see them. I doubt it. But, you know, we have to try. We have to try.
So you can see there's a little, on this side you can see the dot on there.
And those little adhesive dots, John, they are heat activated,
They're little glue bits, So we'll get on to how you use it in a bit. That's going to be in our second episode, only because please do not get your iron on the glue dots. If you do, it happens. We have iron cleaners and things like that, but trust me,
there are ways and means.
Have your little iron cleaner nearby. Every single one of us has made something with Bonder web or something, put it the wrong way around, and you've got a nice big glob of glue on your iron. There are things we're going to show you on how to do that, but it's just to make it easier for you in case you make a mistake.
And there are a variety of words that we use at that point that wouldn't be appropriate on screen. So
I'm not saying those words, you can.
We're not going to do that, John. We're not
but
going
the thing with this is you've got the grid on the other side where the fusible is over here. Now the quilter's grid is 36 inches wide, and we've given you 6.5 meters because you're going to need 9 pieces of 28 inches. I've cut mine 29, and the reason being is that however it's been cut, normally we're a little bit into a square. So when you get this, if you count along the way and you've got 35 and then 2 little bits on the end, that is absolutely fine. Do not worry. If you've got 36 dead and a little bit on the end, wonderful, you've won. That's great. These come all different printing. It's ever so slightly off sometimes. Do not worry, it is completely, you've still got the same length, even if the printing isn't exactly right on it. And all you're going to do when you get this, I would literally just count 29 down along, because obviously it's in one giant 6.5 meter piece. Just count 28 along here, because you're doing 14 2-inch squares. In the 29th block, cut it in half, and then you've got your first piece, and you will have 9 pieces.
Is this a Blue Peter moment?
I did have.
Well, it should be. Here's one we
Over
cut
here.
earlier. Oh, John.
No, it's here.
I do love you, John.
Oh, there it is. It's just because I put
Never
my
a
bags on
dull
top of it.
moment.
So this is 36 inches by 28. So you're going to cut 9 pieces
If
like
I move
that.
the 6.5 metres out of the way,
Oh, you're so
you
good.
will have. I know.
This is why it's a
I'm
team
being
event.
Mum. We'll
Team
just
event.
tidy everything up. So once you've cut them, you'll have 9 pieces
This
like
size,
that.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so it's 36 inches
Wonderful.
by 29. And, oh, perfect. Izzy is good, isn't she?
Hey.
Yes. So there we go. 29 inches by 36. That is, or 36 and a half, whatever works for you. If you are happy doing 28 by 36, do that, whatever works. But you do need at least 28 squares on there in order to do it. Now, the other great thing about this is if you want to scale this project down, because you've got such an enormous, colossal bundle over here, you could do 1-inch squares. And you could do a
Yes.
wall hanging with it, which I'm going to try.
You know
Whether
who's
you get
planning on
time.
doing this, don't you?
Who?
That there, Jane.
Oh.
Jane Alcock. I'm telling everyone, Jane, so you better crack on.
Oh, but
you know,
you
it'll
know
be
what
one of those
Jane's
things
like.
she's
She'll
bought.
be like Stefan, that she's bought it, she does it,
No,
and the next thing you
it'll
know,
go
she'll
in her
come in. It'll be on a coat or something. It'll just be walking around, and everybody will go
Sashaying in and out of
exactly.
the office. No,
Wafting.
It will have
Oh,
gone
no,
in
you
her
waft.
stash.
You've got
Oh,
that
I
little
waft.
waft.
I
yes.
waft.
So that's your kit. So the thing that you're going to do then when you get your kit, if you're going to do what I've done, oh, and on top of that, we've obviously, the pattern is completely free off Tilda World. So if you lose it, tildaworld.com, search under the solid sections. You've got loads in there, loads of other beautiful patterns for the solids as well. And boom, boom, boom. So get that on there, and then you'll be able to go to page number 5. Now, page number 5 is your key for the first bit. And what that does, if you don't mind, ma'am, thank you, sir. What you will see is each one of your fabrics. So it'll tell you fabric number 1, you need 1,164 squares. Don't be alarmed. We're going to show you tricks and trades.
Crikey, don't cut those. If you're watching and you're going
Yes, there
to
are
work
tricks.
along,
There are tricks.
don't
There are
cut
tricks.
them yet.
If you're using the quilter's grid like we've done, there are tricks that you can do.
definitely.
And then you've got 19 of fabric 2, 5 of fabric 3, 18 of fabric 4, but it's all listed.
Yes.
And what I found really helpful was, of course, I'm in an office environment. Not my office either. I just go to the giant photocopier, which is bigger than anything I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, wow. Look at
And
this.
I blew it up.
Yes.
So you're able to then go, and then once you've cut it, you just then draw it through, score through it, or highlight it, or tick it, or whatever you want. And what I did was, you get, if you're doing the 2-inch squares, the rule of thumb is you get 20 in a width of fabric. So the first one I pointed at was fabric 34. I need 34 squares, so I know that's going to be 2 width of fabric strips. So I cut the width of fabric strips and then cut them double, and then I cut 40 of them because I'm going to have leftover bits. So that's how I then would just do it. And I would cut my width of fabric strips and then cut them down.
Now, John, cutting strips.
See, I didn't have a stripology ruler. I know.
Wow.
And I was standing here and I was preparing everything, and apart from the teal, the peacock.
The peacock.
I did cut
Leave that back, guys. Leave that back.
Well, I cut 280 of those, but the rest of it, now I cut a lot, so this isn't a race, this is not a competition. I'm not saying this in order to inspire you to go at that speed, but using the stripology ruler, a big blade, it is brand new blade because we'll get to that. I cut all of these squares in an hour and a half.
Wow.
Apart from probably 800 of the fabric ones, but we'll get to that in a minute. So it is possible to do it quickly, but safely. We only care about it being safe. Do not go mad and cut things just for the sake of it being quick.
And part of it being safe is having the right equipment, having a decent rotary mat, having your stripology, which we'll talk about next.
You don't have to have a stripology.
No, but if you do,
but you'll regret it if you don't.
You'll be much more sane if you do.
It does go a lot quicker having the stripology.
And like you just mentioned, a nice, sharp, new blade.
Look,
don't spend all this money on a fabric kit just to try and cut it with a blade that is akin to a butter knife, as Jane says.
It is. But that is
my rotary cutter once, did you know? She used my rotary cutter once and she went, "What is this?"
Oh, I do love Jane.
And I said, "Oh, do I need a new blade, Jane?" And she said, "You'd be better off cutting your fabric with a butter knife."
That's what I love about Jane.
I took that as a yes.
Well, it was a suggestion rather than anything. It's brilliant.
That, you know, and she's so lovely because we'll be doing something and she'll come along, and if we're doing it in a way that perhaps isn't best, she'll look at us and go, "Please don't do that."
Oh, I
so
love it.
Sweet.
I love it.
You know, if anyone's ever cutting in the wrong direction, perhaps towards themselves a bit or whatever, she just goes, "Please don't do that."
Oh, I love Jane.
Oh, she's so sweet.
You just love Jane.
You know, I'd be better off cutting this fabric with a butter knife.
That is
was
definitely
the very
something
polite
I'm
way
gonna
of
be
saying,
using.
"Stop
What are
being
you
a
doing?"
skinflint and sort yourself out a new blade.
Now, the great thing with these labels, you can peel them on and off. So I've just pulled it off there and onto here. I've got bits of fabric left in the bag, and it's important because you will notice that fabric 2 and fabric 3 are really close. Some of these pinks, some of these greens, they are very, very close. So you need to just make sure you are labeling everything really, really well. The next thing is, first of all, do not be embarrassed. If you have bought this kit, you fold it up, put it in the bags, you start cutting, and then you leave it for 3 months. We are people. We are busy. It happens. All I'm going to say to you is, I don't care if it's been in the bag for a minute or for a month or for a year. When you get it out, you take it like this, you hand it to someone else and ask them to iron it for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I would. There is technology everywhere, John.
No, there's a tiny bit there.
There's a tiny bit. We'll just move that
Just a tiny bit. Now, with the stripology, if you're doing with the fabrics, did you notice how I said somebody else should do the ironing?
Do you do the ironing in your own house?
I point, of course I do. I've told you I'm the master of pointing.
I feel that
Andrew,
poor long-suffering Andrew, I feel.
Oh, he loves it.
I feel.
I am very lucky. I still don't quite know how I got him to marry me, but I think it's the staying married to me is more tricky.
I'm not sure, John. There we go. How's that looking?
Thank you, ma'am.
You know, I don't really iron anything. This is the only time I
you're
ever
pressing
iron
now.
anything.
You're pressing now, so technically if a husband sees it, you're pressing.
Natasha and I don't iron, habitually. I've said to her, it makes me chuckle that we both have interests that involve ironing.
Pressing.
Yes. Well, this is it.
Now, stripology rulers. Many of you have used them, many of you have not. While Gemma is doing that, I'm going to just talk you through. If I could trouble you to pop a close-up on whilst holding a hot iron.
He wants the world, doesn't he? Should we go
You will notice on the back, you have got these non-slip grip lines. They're amazing. They really, really are. And what I love about these is you've got these little grips between each line. You can see it almost looks a little bit like, there you go, you can see it better there. You can just tell that texture there. When I put this onto the fabric, it holds into position. Most rulers are like this. They're perfectly smooth. They've got a little bit of resistance because you've got the printing on it. Yeah. But every single one of us have these rulers and they move and they slide and you can't quite get the grip on it. And you're always a bit scared to put a bit of tension on it because the ruler may very well move. Yes. So these stripologies are really good to be able to stop the movement of fabric while you place everything. And especially when you're cutting something like this. Sorry, I'm just leaning that towards you.
It's all right.
What is really important is I do two things. First, I line up the fold of the fabric to the mat. And then I don't worry about this bit here, and I then try and line up another fold of the fabric up here in a straight line. Sure. And the reason being is you then have got two anchor points on the mat that are straight. And I'm then going to clean that little bit off there on the edge to make sure that I've got a nice clean straight line to start with. Just a whisker, John. Just a whisker. Just a whiff of it off. Just a tiny little whiff.
Perfect.
And that's perfectly lined up. And this is why a brand new blade comes in really handy. Yes. Now, the reason I was able to do this, now I'm saying this assuming you are an experienced person using a rotary cutter. Do not, under any circumstances, do more than one layer of fabric if you're not experienced. Please, I use a fresh blade and I have 4 layers on each one of these, but I cut at least 300 meters of fabric a week. So please, I'm very experienced on it. Don't do it if you're not. And all you're doing now, on your Strapology ruler over here, you've got these lovely dark lines across the top there.
Yeah.
And you've got lighter lines here in white. So all I'm going to do now, sorry I had my ruler the wrong way around,
okay.
I'm going to line a black line up with one point on the cutting mat, because remember I've now lined these all up at the top. And once I've done that as well, I'm going to find 2 points on the cutting mat here that line up with where my fabric was and over here with the cutting mat. So not only have I now lined the fabric up with the cutting mat, I've lined my Strapology up with the cutting mat as well. So once I've got my line straight that way, I'm going to move my first cutting point over a little bit so that again it's lined up with the marks on the cutting mat over here. So that means that when I cut this little slither off the end there, I've got my nice flat straight edge for each of my fabrics. Now the great thing is this, I can now do that and it doesn't move very easily. So I feel a lot safer using a Strapology ruler than I do than using a normal ruler, because you've got that resistance of the grips there. Now the rotary cutter blade, you open the blade then and you can see there's a little hole over here like a teardrop. You then pop your blade into that teardrop section there, hold over here, mind you haven't got your fingers in the way, and then you just cut along the way there. So now, without moving anything, I know I've cut that slither and I've got a straight edge there. I need 1 2-inch strip, so I count 0, 1, 2. Again, open my blade, put it into my little teardrop, line that down, and off I go. So I've now cut my 2-inch strip of that. I only need 1 strip of each of these fabrics for numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm on my second piece over here. First thing I'm doing is lining up a straight edge, which is now in number 7. You see my little teardrop, move my blade, I drop that into the little teardrop there, and just take it slowly. Once it naturally nestles in, you just put your hand over here. Again, I'm nowhere near where I'm cutting. And I can follow my fingers up if I choose to, and that is now cut completely to give me my now straight edge. Now I've gone to odd numbers, so remember we know that they're going to be 2 inches, so I'm going 7, 8, 9. 7 plus 2 is 9. So I take my blade, pop it into the teardrop just above number 9, and I cut that there. So I've cut my first row of 2 inches of my second fabric. And then over here, we're moving on to the third fabric. The cutting off, squaring off edge that I've got here is at number 14. Same as before, pop my blade into the teardrop above 14. I've got a nice straight edge. Move that down 2 inches, 14, 15, 16. 14 plus 2 is 16. And there we go. Now I've been blathering to you at the same time, but you can see now, there are 2 ways you can do this. All you can do is take away the little slither. You take away the little slither. You take away the little slither. And then you take the fabric that you don't need that's left, take that, fold it, pop it back on your label, and you put that back in your bag.
Don't interfere with the piece you cut that you want to keep.
Don't touch anything, don't move anything.
Top
And there's a
tip, John.
reason I'm doing this.
Sure.
And then everything over here, I know that this is my fabric 3, because I've matched it with my little bag. I put my fabric name back on the fabric, and then I pop this back in the bag. Perfect. This is why your bags come in really handy. And then number 4 is my toffee. Now, for some reason, we've managed to get fabric 4 is number 4, and it's toffee, but that is just what it is.
That was just chance, wasn't it?
Just chance. Okay, so now we've got everything there. You've got a little whisper of fabric now to dispose of. Oh, thank you, ma'am.
That's all right.
So now you've got 2 choices. You can either go and cut your 2 inches on here on their own, or you can take your Strapology ruler, and all you do is you rotate your Strapology ruler. All I will say to you is that you haven't cut your selvage off to start with,
sure, and
you will have a fold. So there are 2 ways of doing this. There are people who are much more economical with their fabric. You are not going to like what I'm doing now. And it is because I know that there are people who want those extra 2 inches of fabric or 1.5 inches of fabric, because you'll use it like I do for foundation paper piecing, a plique. You don't want to waste that little bit. That's absolutely fine. For you, pull these down, line them up, cut your 2 inches with a normal ruler. If you're comfortable doing this and you're not too worried about losing it, you then slide these up next to each other like that. I'm going to rotate them just for safety. You rotate them this way. And you can see again I have lined these up with the mat over here and the mat over there. And then I'm just taking my ruler, exactly like before, And you can tell now I've lined my black line up there, lined my black line up there. This is going to be my straightening point.
Fabulous.
Now, I've got 4 layers of fabric here. This is a new blade. I'm very, very comfortable with doing this. If you're not, open it up and take your time. So now I've cut my first dead end. Next I'm going to go over, because there needs to be 2 inches. So I'm going over to 2, and then I'm going over to 4, and then I'm going over to 6, and I'm going over to 8, and then I'm going over to 10.
And John, as well as being safe here, the beauty of this, of course, is that with the best will in the world, and even if you have a grip on your ruler, there is always a potential. I mean, you're not going to veer off this way with the ruler, and even if the ruler doesn't move, you've still got the option of your blade. And why do they do that? They just sometimes go off with a mind of their own.
It does.
But here you've got the grooves both sides with that notch.
And it's also, once you're in the groove, it's quite hard to actually get that out without lifting it up. So this is a lot safer to use. It is an expense, I do understand. It's a considered purchase, but it does make your life a lot easier.
But once you've bought it,
and store it flat under the sofa, under the bed.
But once you've got it,
don't do what I've just done and stand on its side.
Once you've got one, you've got one.
Exactly.
You know, my mum, I always say this, and she, you know, absolutely fine with it, but she's a very sensible, frugal Yorkshire woman. But even, you know, whenever she sees something like this that's going to just be such an asset to your sewing.
Oh, it is.
She'll say, well, why wouldn't you have it?
But for me, it's the saving of time. If I'm going to save an hour and a half cutting my fabric, doing it this way, the ruler is X amount. I would rather spend the money, because that's just one project. And if I know I'm saving that over a series of projects, they last forever.
They do. They're amazing.
They really do.
And it's things like having your decent cutting mat, your decent rotary cutter. All of these things will improve the quality of your sewing. Just
and
like
the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, and just like using decent fabric.
Exactly.
When I first started out, I was using cheap thread, cheap fabric.
We all do.
And you have all these problems. And cheap needles as well as another thing, you know. And we've talked about changing your rotary blade, but change your needle. Change everything. Change all, you know, get it all fresh.
Well, the way I look at it is when you get dressed in the morning, you have a shower, you get ready, you make yourself lovely, and you go out into the day. If you don't do that, you don't feel quite as lovely as you do when you do make that.
You do make yourself lovely. I've just noticed there's a thread.
Thank you,
and
darling.
you do look lovely.
Oh, you're very kind.
Doesn't he always have a great shirt on?
It's always Andrew's.
I know it is. Poor
now,
Andrew.
Top tip. Okay, you're going to have bits left over like this.
Lovely.
Ask me how I know. Do not put these in with your bag of 2 inches unless it's 2 inches.
Okay.
Because there's nothing worse than getting it lined up on the quilter's grid and go, what on earth is on my iron? There's a giant hole in there. And it's because this isn't quite 2 inches.
You might want a little envelope to put
Well, exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to say. So if people do keep these and hang on to them, I put all of these together in one bundle and then put them in a little place for my foundation paper piece. And we'll put them with our little Tilda friend over here.
She'll look after those.
I love them.
Mind you, if you did want them with the labels so that you know which colour is which, you could put them in a little envelope in the bag.
Exactly.
Separate.
Exactly.
So that they are.
But now we have cut 20 of them. We've been nattering away. You take your 20, you pop it in your bag. Okay?
Great.
You take your 20, you pop it in your bag.
And John, for this particular project, all of the squares are the same size.
Exactly.
So with other projects, you might put, say, a little quilter's clip on there with a little note to say that they're the 2-inch squares or whatever. But with this one,
they're all the same size. And if you're going to downscale it and do it as 3 inches, as 1 inch, you can then put the 1-inch pieces in there as well. Sure. It's entirely up to you.
Great.
Now, I am not going to underestimate the scale of what we are doing.
I'm glad you're not going to underestimate the scale of what we're doing, John, because it's a...
This is what worked best for me. Okay, this may not work best for you, but what I liked about it was I can start... Wait, they're out of order now.
A big and fabulous project requires big and fabulous organisation.
And what is even more exciting is that if you can steal one of Jane's boxes without her knowing. Has she found out yet?
No.
No, I love it.
Don't let on. She'll watch this because she's
It's fine because it's been months then and I can just turn and say, what are you talking about? That was months ago. And what
so
I
it doesn't
do
count
is
after a certain length of time.
I make sure that they're all in order. Now this is important for the next section, for the next week that we do this. By having all your bags in order, when you are looking for fabric number 3 or 4, at this point you may want to just put labels on the top, little sticky notes, post-it notes, whatever works best for you. But being able to then just pull one out and know that's fabric number 22 is going to be really easy when we come to do all of the squares. So that is our first video. Are there any questions that you've got that you can think of that we haven't covered?
Bits and bobs we can talk about. I did want to chat a little more about Tracy, to be honest.
Yes, this is a really good point.
Because this project here is all piecing squares, and I think a lot of what makes people feel anxious about the prospect of doing some quilting is that they're not necessarily confident with creating lots of complicated blocks.
Yep.
And yet you can, like we've said, the pixelated effect of the background is beautiful, but that aside, you can create a quilt just using squares and half square triangles. These are perfect beginner sort of forays into quilting, aren't they?
They really are. And these patterns of Tracy's are really
They're
good.
Brilliantly written.
She's got a really lovely pattern collection, which I think is just over there.
I've got it under my nose here. I brought one of the patterns in because I really wanted to sort of show how her patterns work.
The way she does it, I think is ingenious. She's come up with a really clever way, which works very well with Quilter's Grid. She's got this wonderful diagram on how best to do it, and you can tell where the half square triangles are, and you can just tell that works really, really well with the grid method. And you can scale up, scale down. You could do these as 5-inch blocks if you wanted to. You can do it any size you like, in order to that having that grid makes it so much easier. Obviously your fabric requirements will change accordingly, but having that grid makes life so much easier to be able to do. And Tracy's patterns, she's got a series of them. We've got the hare behind, we've got the moth here.
Absolutely.
She's got a really wonderful eye on how she does these.
And the brilliant thing is these would all work fantastically with Quilter's Grid, wouldn't they? You know, but we do have, you know, you've got your fabric requirement at the start, then a really detailed cut this many squares, sew it this way, and she just covers off absolutely everything for you. And then I love this. Each row by row, and a little place to tick telling you how many blocks to put together. I mean, it's up to you. You might want to piece it in rows, you might want to split it into sections and piece it in sections. But
equally with this, you may not want to do the, you may just want to cut a full width of fabric, strip a green out and there, and it doesn't matter because with the Quilter's Grid, it automatically appears as though you've actually pieced it. Yes. But all you're doing is you're just following the lines on the back of the Quilter's Grid. But we get a bit more into that in the second section.
Pause for a moment. You can put your strip down and yet it will appear pieced.
I know, you'll see. I know, it's magical.
Next show, isn't it?
That's our next series there.
It
so
is.
I think we're at the point now where you're going to go and you're going to do your homework.
Yes.
And you're going to go and cut all your pieces out. And we're not going to be offended if you don't get it all done.
No.
Try, and if you want to just give it a go, do block 1. Just get ready for block 1 and then see how we go, and you'll feel a lot more confident once you finish block 1 and gone from there.
And the peacock cutting, are we leaving that?
Well, it's the same thing. We can do as many as you like. Well, I'm going to show you a little trick. I'm going to show you a little trick which Izzy taught me, and I think it's a really lovely trick because for me, I did go and cut out my 1,164 squares. Ooh. And then Izzy went, and when I went to go and piece them together, I looked at this and they were, well, I can show, we'll show you in episode 2.
We will.
Long strips, and I'm like, oh, you're so
in the
clever.
interest of not driving yourself quietly mad, between now and episode 2, perhaps you'll want to cut your other colours. And I think, you know, to be completely honest, John, thank you for going through the cutting today in so much detail, because the thing that held me back from quilting for a really, really long time was the cutting, the nervousness of cutting those fabrics. So once you've got cutting, we're going to show you how to put this together. It's brilliant, it's simple,
and
it's not piecing thousands of squares in the traditional way, although you've got the option to do that should you wish.
Absolutely.
But get the cutting, because that's going to be, I think, most people's biggest obstacle.
It is.
Once you've done that, perhaps minus the peacock, because you'll see in the second episode what we're doing with that. Once you've done that,
you're fine. But I will say rotary cutter safety is paramount, and it is very important that you respect the fact these are incredibly sharp, especially if you've replaced them. I've run quilting classes for many years, and twice I've seen a lady take the top of her finger off with them. Please, you've got to be careful. The minute this is on it is not open for me until I'm about 0.5 centimetre away from the mat. Then I open it, and by the time I get to the top, when I'm lifting my hand up, I lock the blade. This must be closed, only open when you are cutting. It is really important. The number of people you will see leaving it on the side open, if you're sewing with other people as well, it's incredibly unsafe, because somebody may not see that there, go and drag this, and they've sliced open their hand, and it is an incredibly sharp tool. Please be very, very cautious and make sure your blade's locked at all times.
And for our home sewers as well, if you leave that blade out and there's small people or animals around, and you know, even if you knock it and it falls and it lands on your foot, I've seen this before.
I know, and it's really unpleasant. And the sharpness of it, the nerve damage is extraordinary.
You never think it's going to happen until it happens to you.
Exactly.
So, and I've witnessed it as well. It's no fun. But
there we are.
We're all good.
And we will see you.
Nice to have you with us. We will see you for
soon.
episode 2.
See you soon for episode 2.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.